right, we're live, man. How's it been? How you been?
Yeah. It's good. Ramping up for the holidays. I mean, we're already in the holiday season. Hopefully, you had a great Thanksgiving with your family and had some good food. I know I did. I'm grateful.
Oh yeah, we haven't met since Thanksgiving, so yeah, mine was good. I went to South Carolina, spent it with some family. Good little
Okay.
time. Um, yeah, I actually just got back from Miami. Over
Okay.
there. Yeah, I went to see Art Basel. I got to see Chance the Rapper. You remember Chance the Rapper?
Of course.
Yeah, so he had a listening party. I think I'm gonna do a little blog write up for that too. So look for that to come in the future. But it was a really cool event. You had like beanbag chairs, and like you would go in. It was like silent. I don't know if you've seen the silent disco where they have like the headphones on.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was kind of more of an into. So everybody had their own headphones. They had the bass running through it. They had videos on the wall and everything. So and he was rapping on there like his last full length project called The Big Day wasn't really received too well, um, and so I think he went back into the studio and really tried to lock in. So he's really rapping on this next project. So I'm really excited to hear that. I'm not exactly sure. I don't think what we heard was the final product, but he's got some stuff on there that's really good. He's definitely on a he's taking more of a Pan Africanist route on this project. So it's called Starline. So yeah, in reference to Garvey. Yeah,
Wow.
he was talking a lot of good stuff on there. So real excited for that. I don't know if it's coming out this year or if it's coming out next year. I would if I was him, I'd hold it till hold it for a while the next year because I think it would have a real contention for rap album of the year um, if he sequences some things a little bit differently. So, because he was really got the bars, he brought back a lot of what people liked about Chance the Rapper. So, um, yeah, good project to look forward to. But yeah, but yeah, all together though, Miami was cool. They had a lot of. I went to a couple of art shows down there. A lot of club vibes where like house music, not necessarily hip hop music, which was refreshing. Like coming out in Atlanta a lot, it's a little trapped out sometimes. So I like to just vibe a little bit. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna aim to find a couple of spots like that here in Atlanta, and see what it's like out there. So but yeah, let's get into the show. So today we're gonna be talking about the correlation between the decline in the NBA and in hip hop. So this was we have a video on the screen right now that I'm gonna play. I'm gonna try and skip through because it's about like 7 minutes long, so I don't want to take up too much time playing it. I'm gonna let this guy just kind of he inspired the discussion today, so I'm gonna let him do the little introduction to the topic, and then we'll have some dialogue about it. I talked a little bit about this with my father yesterday, so we were just kind of talking. I was like, yeah, I think it's a good topic to have on here. So yeah, let me just play this real quick, and then we can start our discussion.
Cool.
This is why the NBA is losing interest. But the number one reason,
You
in
can
my
hear it, okay?
opinion, is because basketball has
The volume needs to come up some.
Okay, let me.
unofficially become a upper middle class or rich person sport. Let me break it down. So it costs anywhere between $30 to $100 per hour to get a kid trained for
Can you
basketball.
make it any
And to play
louder?
on that
Yeah, 1 second. Let me see. I'm gonna turn my mic down while it's playing so it don't get an echo. So let me
Okay.
just trying to be better with the with the engineering on here. Okay.
An AAU team, it costs anywhere
Is
from
that better?
You gotta let it play so I can tell.
Okay, okay. Let me see.
$300 to $1,000 to be on the team, and that's without travel, gas, food,
It hasn't
hotels,
changed
new
much.
shoes.
Yeah, let me check something real quick. Let me see the audio settings. Okay. Let me know how this sounds.
To become a upper middle class or rich person sport. Let me break it down. So it costs anywhere.
Still not too. Still can't hear it too well.
I can hear it a little better.
Okay. I'll try. I'm gonna maximize it on here. Just okay, so we'll probably just have to.
Between $30 to $100 per hour to get a kid training for basketball. And to play on the AAU team, it costs anywhere from $300 to $1,000 to be on the team, and that's without travel, gas, food, hotels, new shoes, all of that stuff. And today, if a kid isn't getting trained around the clock all year with basketball, they practically have no chance of making the NBA, even if they're really good and got the height and all that. And the average American parent doesn't have the funds or the time available to invest into developing their kid. Now, some people will counter argue that point and say, well, the best of the best kids, they don't have to pay to be on these teams. They get these things for free, right? That's what a lot of people will say and think. But the issue with that argument is, historically, some of the greatest players in the history of the game were late bloomers. They weren't that good at 12, 13, 14, 15. A lot of times, they're not even that good at 16. And in today's game, some of those kids that would be late bloomers in today's league, they're not making it because that development is stopping because they don't have, like I said, they don't have those resources or funds to continue developing their interest in the game. And this is a huge issue because historically, the NBA was made from players that come from low-income backgrounds. The LeBrons, the Iversons, the Wilt Chamberlains, Isaiah Thomas, KD.
Yeah, so I'm gonna just pause it right there. So so far, what do you think? I know your son plays basketball, so what's do you see that as kind of accurate, or how do you feel about that?
He's pretty much right on target,
Okay.
and he's right. They have to play year round. My son played year round, and as a matter of fact, as you know, and as I probably mentioned on here, he went to college in August, and and he was the last out of the nest of my three children, and it was an adjustment because, as he was saying, it was year round. So every month there was some place to go, whether it was practice or games. It was nonstop. So when he went away, it was like, I don't know. The best way to describe it is, and I'm sure you haven't done this in a while, but remember as a kid spinning around until you got dizzy,
Yeah.
and then you sit down and then you're trying to get your balance. In some ways, that's what it was when he went away because I was just spinning
Mm.
for shucks. It seems like 10 years because he started playing. I think he started at the. I think his first team was with the YMCA, and he must
Okay.
have been like 8, somewhere around there. And so he played, and that part where he was talking about as far as the finance part, yes.
Mm.
Some people thought that if he was quote unquote good enough, then he would get on those teams that everything would be paid for. And yeah, yeah, I guess that's true. But the challenge is that there's only but so many slots on the Nike team or the Adidas team. And
Right.
so after those slots are filled, you got thousands of high school students. And so Who's paying for it? Their parents. Their parents is paying for it. So he's absolutely right.
Okay. Okay. So we'll I just wanted to tap into that real quick. So I'm gonna continue playing. I think he's just kind of listing some players right here, but we'll get back into it. Hold on.
People come from low income backgrounds when it comes to sports. They play with a hunger, a drive, a passion and flair that usually comes from not having much. And with the game being so expensive to play now, today's NBA is mostly filled with players that came from upper middle class or well-to-do families. And that's why it comes across as so uncompetitive or passionless, I should say, is because these players they don't play with that same fire that people play from when they come from nothing. And the proof is in the pudding. There was a recent study done about players in the NBA, and what they discovered was almost 50% of today's NBA players are related to former professional athletes or Division One athletes. And the problem is that there's so much money in youth basketball now that the system is not ever going to change. So it's going to remain this way. And the craziest part about this is it isn't new. It's being brought to the light more now, but this isn't a new phenomenon. Most people don't know that since 1999, the NBA lost nearly 50% of its audience after Michael Jordan retired from the Bulls, obviously. See, the thing with the NBA and why the NFL, in America at least, will always be king is the NBA is everything is based on the players. And the NFL is based on the shield and the teams. In the NFL, the fans, they're going to root for their teams no matter what. They don't care how many trades happen. If the team is terrible, if they're good, they're going to remain fans of their team. Meanwhile, in the NBA, generally speaking, today's fan is only rooting for the players. When the players switch and change teams, they're changing their fandom for the team that they was rooting for.
Now stop it, Dre. Stop it. He said a mouthful.
Right.
He said so. I want to touch on this. Then I'm going to let you talk. I know there's so many different points to be raised. So it would have been even more challenged if I wasn't at least in the so-called middle class to keep up with the economics of all the camps and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. But what a lot of people don't know if you're not in the mix is that when you go to these different tournaments, it's not cheap because when you go to the tournament, the ticket price per person can be $20 and up.
Mm-hmm.
And so if your son or daughter is in a tournament, a whole weekend tournament, and you want to bring the entire family, you might drop a Benjamin just to get in to the tournament, and that's aside from food. If it's out of town, if it's a travel team, you got a hotel that you got to stay at. This young man is speaking facts. And I want to add one more thing, um, and that is, oh shoot, the thought just went out of my head. Hopefully it'll come back, but this is good.
Okay. No problem. Let's see. Cause I've only I actually did play a little bit of AAU, but just very briefly. Like when I did get down to Georgia, that's more when I like started actually taking basketball a little bit more seriously as compared to I was playing football, um, pretty much my whole life. But basketball, I definitely started to like it a lot more down here. But when I got down here from Oceanside, New York, and came down to Gwinnett, I was like, oh, they play a different level here. So kids were on AAU teams since they was 6 or 7, so they were already on their teams and stuff like that. So it was just a different level of competition when I got down here. So that's something I realized early. But yeah, I'm gonna finish this up and then I don't know how much more we'll see.
And when Michael Jordan played, he became so big and popular that he became bigger than the game. And when he retired, the NBA failed to ever fully replace him. Also added to the fact that the average NBA game today, after you pay for parking, food, and whatever extra fees you got to pay for, it's going to be around $200. And most of the games are not shown on national television. So the average fan today, they can't afford to support or develop their interest in the game. And the thing is, the league is making more money than ever due to TV deals. So a lot of people, they just ignoring the problem right now because they're making so much money. But the thing is, this isn't sustainable. And if they don't change it, the contracts that the players get, they'll start to get smaller and smaller. Which is why, in my opinion, and I can't believe I'm saying this because I've been a diehard NBA fan all my life since I was 2-3 years old. All I can remember is watching the NBA. So it's amazing that it even comes to this point. But at this rate, in my opinion at least, I really believe the NBA will be irrelevant in America, just in America, within the next 15 years. And when I say irrelevant, I'm not talking about the diehard fans because the diehard fans, they always gonna support no matter what's going on. But I'm specifically talking about irrelevant to the people that are on the fence or they're just average fans, which is majority of basketball watchers. They're average fans. I believe the game will become irrelevant to them, and some may argue it already is. And if you don't believe me, ask the average NBA or basketball fan who was the number one pick in the draft this year. Most people, even NBA fans, don't have a clue.
Yeah, see, I was one of them. I was like, hold on, dang, I actually don't know that. I haven't been, I haven't really been too tapped into sports. Not especially not how I have been in the past, but mainly it is because of what he's talking about right now. So I used to really follow players like really ever since Kevin Garnett was my favorite basketball player, so I was following him from the Timberwolves to the Boston Celtics to the New Jersey Nets. So I was following Kevin Garnett, and then when he left the league, then I was just like, well, all right, since I didn't have necessarily a home team, like my dad was a Knicks fan, but I was never really a huge Knicks fan. I watch them as just kind of default. Then I came down to Atlanta, was like the Hawks. I was like, they're all right. They ain't never really win anything, or had me invested enough to become a fan. So I've just been a player watcher really. So yeah, right now I'm Kyrie, my favorite player, and then you got Anthony Edwards, who I think is one of the last of a dying breed. But yeah, I want to talk about that a little later. I think he's almost done here, so I'm gonna let this finish up.
Now name another period of time where NBA fans didn't know who the number one pick was. Or not even only that, they didn't care to watch and to find out is the number one pick good or not. This has never happened before. The NBA is in trouble. And some people gonna say the NBA, how can you say that it's the best that it's ever been as far as talent? And I would agree with that. Especially when it comes to international play. You got SGA, you got Giannis, Joker, Luka, Wemby, and which I think probably gonna end up being the greatest player of all time, and so many more. But the problem is the average American, we not intrigued or interested by the European or overseas athletes. And it's because we're not familiar with their story or background. To us, when they get to the NBA, this is our first time for most of us ever hearing or seeing them. Compared to the other stars of the past, we seen these people from high school. We might have heard of them when they was in 7th, 8th grade. This might be our first time hearing them coming up on the scene. We started hearing of LeBron when he was 15, 16 years old. We saw KD in college. We saw D Rose in college. Michael Jordan was an All-American. So these stories, they were brewing, and they was programming us to be accustomed and to being used to these people and these names and these games. Where nowadays, no matter how good these overseas players are, when they come to the league, like I said, we don't know who the hell these people are. And if we don't know them, we can't be interested in the story and the game.
Okay. I'll just fix up everything. Okay, yeah. So that last part is the key that I wanted to discuss, and that's how I want to kind of wrap it into to hip hop. So I think it's kind of a loss of the localization of like once things in like if you look at Atlanta, like the culture of Atlanta, and you listen to the music, you can kind of hear, oh yeah, this is an Atlanta sound. Same thing goes with basketball. Like, oh, this is an Atlanta style of playing. Like when I first got down to Georgia, I realized how good people were at football, and you would hear like people knew about the area because of the type of football they played, and it was similar with basketball. It was like, okay, or basketball came a little bit later in terms of people's familiarity with like Gwinnett County, but it comes like in so New York had a flavor of basketball, so it's like you would have a New York point guard and be like, okay, yeah, they get to the rim good, and maybe not known for their jump shot, and then you got the LA players who were, so it was more localized, and you could follow a narrative like, oh yeah, I want to see this New York player play this California, the best player over here. So I think with as time has gone on and now people are able to move around so much, like these how he was saying, pro athletes, they can afford to put their children in some of the top schools. So it's like, okay, now they're going to Sierra Canyon, or whatever the one LeBron's children go to, um, and they can get their looks, and they can get be in the best competitions, so and that kind of now, so now it's not necessarily, oh, you're the best over here in Georgia, or you're the best in New York. Now you're just kind of the best in the country already at such a young age. Like you're not really getting diversity in play styles anymore. So, and I wanted, and that's kind of just how I wanted to. I was looking at hip hop as well, like with it kind of being extracted from its roots in terms of like a local, being a representation of like a local sound. Now it's kind of so, I guess, monolithic in a way that you can't really tell where anybody's from. Kind of like Drake. Like Drake can sound like he's from Atlanta. He could sound like he's from Houston. He could sound like he's from LA. But the people aren't necessarily connecting on that because of the local sounds, or it's not necessarily the local elements of the music that people are attracted to anymore. And I think that's kind of more for money.
There's so many interesting things that he just said. When I think about the NBA, now I'm not quite old enough to remember Walt Clyde Frazier playing for the
Mm-hmm.
Knicks, but he's an important person to talk about when you think about NBA style.
Mm-hmm.
When you go from Frazier, him and Dr. J are sort of in the same era. Dr. J played a big part in creating the flavor of the NBA. He was the first person to get the big sneaker deal
Mm-hmm.
with Converse, and then from Dr. J, you go to Michael Jordan, and then Michael Jordan kind of blew the top of everything with the endorsements that he got all around.
Mm-hmm.
But when you talk about hip hop, the main player that was responsible for integrating hip hop with the NBA would be AI, Allen
Mm-hmm.
Iverson.
For sure.
And so he's the one who influenced even college basketball and what the Fab Five was doing. And this is a very interesting thought, Dre, because you would have thought that someone would have picked up where AI left off or where Michael left off. And you
Mm-hmm.
can see that the league tried to groom the heir apparent. Obviously, the heir apparent would be LeBron, but LeBron didn't quite fit the persona of either one of those guys. I'm not sure if LeBron Now LeBron is an amazing player, obviously.
Right.
I'm not sure if LeBron had the same kind of aura that Michael had.
Yeah.
And so, and then I think that Morant was trying to replace AI
Hmm.
in, in terms of that whole vibe, but he kind of went off the rails with it. And
Yeah.
so, it's a very, very interesting thing. And then when you think about the hunger factor, and I know you haven't been following the game as closely, but I was in a conversation over Thanksgiving about LeBron James's son, which you know that LeBron's dream was to play with his son.
Right.
And many argue that if it were not for LeBron, his son would have never even got stepped foot on the Laker floor because his son was not quite good enough. He wasn't fully baked yet.
Mm.
And some argue that the part of the reason why the son didn't have the possibility of being as good is because the son didn't have a reason to be as hungry. His father was a multi-millionaire, if not a billionaire.
Hmm.
And so my understanding is that now that the son is on one of the
G
uh,
League teams.
best G League teams,
Hmm.
I was told that the son doesn't even travel with the team,
Yeah.
because why should he feel it necessary?
I mean, yeah, he's. I mean, at the end of the day, I think he's still a billionaire's son. So I think that's the reason he's not traveling. But I think the nepotism in him getting into the league is kind of it just goes along because I mean I think he's because I think when it comes to the NBA, it's almost like any other like a corporate job. Like pretty much you can do as long as you know the basics, you can get in, do the job, but you may not necessarily excel. Like I think that Bronny has definitely had all of the training necessary to keep up with the physicality of the NBA, and I don't think his skill set is there to the point to where he'll do anything exceptional, or I don't see it like miraculously exploding out of nowhere because I think it's now more of a confidence thing with him, that I think he never really truly got to develop in college. And I think some people say they think he was a little rushed into it. Like I think yeah, he definitely wasn't. He could have gone to his senior year if they weren't trying to rush him to play with LeBron. Probably would have done him the best to develop his game a little bit more in college and then come out like a little bit more seasoned. But I think what brought the same luxuries that I think Bronny does kind of embody the type of like how pro athletes children do get to the NBA. Like we do know people locally who are far better, like who could probably beat Bronny in a one on one, or just overall skill set is better, but they didn't have the same highlight tape as Bronny. Like because I've seen Bronny, he's been marketed for so well for since he was in like baby AAU, like the when he was in like 8 and under AAU. So you've seen him grow. He's been playing top competition, so it's like that's really one of the passes that he gets. So honestly, he's been playing top competition his whole life. I don't necessarily think he was playing up at any point in his life. I think he was kind of always been in his age bracket for the most part. But I think those types of that early exposure to that type of competition is kind of what made him in the running for um, to be even considered to go to the NBA. And I think that's something that a lot of kids who aren't in that privileged position have the ability to do. So like with your son, what type of competition was he or was he in was he on AAU, or was he just playing strictly high school basketball? How was that?
No, no, he played. he played a lot of AAU basketball.
Mm.
I can't remember exactly what age he was when he started with AAU. I know he started at the Y, and then he played on his. He started playing for his school team in the sixth grade, and then he played for all the school teams, and then AAU. And one of the things that the gentleman mentioned, and you mentioned as well, with the trainers, because that's another expense that
Mm.
goes into it. And so these, and what people on the outside don't understand is that it's very challenging to get a player on that elite level unless you can provide not just a shooting coach, but now these guys, they have a suite of people working with them, nutritionists,
Right.
and again, if you don't have the funds, then you're behind the eight ball. Most of the top Division 1 players have had they either have had the suite of all of those trainers, or they've been extremely hungry.
Mm-hmm.
Now I grew up in an era where with the street balling, if you were willing to play from sun up to sundown during the summertime, and then you were willing to put that work in, then people would take notice. Now it just so happens that going in that direction wasn't what a Yahweh willed for me. But I remember when I was in middle school, having the gym teachers say, hey, telling the head coach, hey, you need to come and check this guy out. And then the same thing in high school. And so if you ball out, then you can get the attention of people that are willing to help you. But
Mm-hmm.
I do believe what he said is true, that a lot of the players are they're just not as hungry as a Julius Irving or a Magic Johnson, and the guys from that era, they just aren't, you know.
Yeah. And another thing, and I think this is where it kind of ties back into hip hop, is like when you were talking about Ja Morant kind of going off of the rails. It's like that's similar to AI. Like I think AI was able to keep it under control a little bit more, but I think that self destructiveness that comes with that hunger a lot of times is hard to, control. So when you see, and that's kind of similar to like some younger rappers who, they have the talent, they have the skill set to, make it out, but then they get in trouble with the law, just by, kind of being hot headed, doing what it is that they've learned to do that to get them there. Another person I can think of, you've heard of Mikey Williams, the young,
Yes.
yeah, so Mikey Williams. I'm actually not, I don't think he was necessarily from a troubled background, but he was very big early on. I think he kind of had. I think, and that's another thing. I think a lot of them get a lot of too much success a little too early now, since they're being followed from, like, you're being followed from middle school now. So it's like they're
Yes.
telling you, oh, you going to the. He's been told he's going to the NBA since he was seventh grade. And so just trying to live up to those expectations. Now they have the NIL deal, so they got the chance to get paid early. So I think that kind of kills a lot of the hunger at a much earlier age, because I think Mikey started getting paid. I couldn't even tell you how early he probably was getting paid. He might have been. I think he was probably getting a little something prior to basket to the NIL deal going all the way through, but I think he had like I think they found ways around the high school kids not making money. So I know they had like a reality TV show or some sort, him and his family. But yeah, just those factors. Mm.
So one of the things that I can really appreciate about AI and um, Michael Vick is because they came from the bottom. They actually did actually come from the bottom.
Right.
Now, I remember watching a piece of a documentary on John Morant. John Morant didn't come from the bottom. He came from the kind of background that this guy was talking
Right.
about. His father played a big part in training him, so he didn't come from a really. Morant didn't come from a troubled background. Morant would be akin to some of the rappers that I've talked about previously who were not real thugs.
Right.
They were acting. That wasn't really their life. They were acting. They came from. In fact, I was in a conversation recently about Drake, and somebody was telling me that they had troubles relating to Drake because they felt that Drake wasn't authentic,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of falls in line with some of the things I think even you were saying about the problems that you thought people had with him. And if I remember, Drake Drake didn't come up. He didn't start off in rap. He started off on
Degrassi.
right. So you know, um, it's a very interesting conversation. I like to hear more about how you how you see the how you juxtapose what's going on in hip hop with the NBA. I want to hear more about that.
Okay. Yeah. So kind of talking about like yeah. So John Morant is someone who wasn't necessarily from the bottom, so to say, and neither was like Mikey Williams, but they did have that hunger that I think a lot of people were looking for out of like the younger generations. Um, and I think they kind of leaned more into that hip hop vibe of things when it just came to. But I think it really goes into the narrative of the players, like and this is the conversation me and my father were having when we're looking at young players like who's someone who's young. I mean, when I heard about Anthony Edwards. I mean, he's from Georgia, so he went to UGA. But he was from Atlanta, so being from here and seeing him when I seen him go to UGA, then when I seen him get drafted, I started paying attention because I'm familiar with the area that he was coming up on. I had seen his AAU team, or he was on a well-known Atlanta AAU team. I forgot exactly which one, but that was my investment in watching Anthony Edwards and why I continue to watch him because I kind of know where he came from, some of the struggles he may have had to overcome being a good basketball player living in a certain environment. And that's kind of how I used to find rappers as well. Like you would be looking for rappers to tell a certain story from a certain environment and wondering how they survive. So when you think of Young Thug, it's like, yeah, he's from Cleveland Avenue and he's saying that he was doing this, and so like, okay, how did you make it out? And so you're listening, and that's what kind of keeps you invested. And I think now when it comes to since we've since now you kind of have a formula of how to make a song. People don't necessarily have to come from a dangerous environment to make that type of music, or not even necessarily dangerous, but you don't necessarily have to promote your struggle, which some people might say is a good thing because we want, but that's kind of what lost the appeal of rap overall because now it's no longer you're just making music that you think other people want to hear and not necessarily from your true life experiences. And I think that's kind of like, and that's what I'm talking about when I say like with We the Sauce. It's like, where did your sauce come from? Like, did you get it from, were you hustling? Were you in the gym 24/7 playing with older kids, and these older kids was roughing you up while you was just trying to get better? So we're not getting any of those stories anymore that we can really latch on to. And where I was talking to my father about like, he's not necessarily the hugest Steph Curry fan, and I was like, Steph Curry, one of the last people who's had somewhat of an underdog story coming from, but because he came from Davidson, And I was like, had he gone to Duke, his story wouldn't be as appealing because it's not necessarily the underdog story. Like, he had a father who played in the NBA previously, and but now it's like he was he since he was undersized, went to not D2 but like a lower level D1 school. He came in as just like against all odds and started winning. So that was kind of his appeal. But then when we look at when he was talking about the international players, now we're looking at Giannis, Luca. We don't know anything about them, so it's just like we're really not that invested in. We don't I don't know anything about Giannis, honestly, other than he's from Greece. I don't know anything about Greece, so it's just like I don't know what I'm looking for. I don't know who his competition was prior to the NBA. So it's like, you'd be like, oh, he drives to the hoop like a New York guard, or he was like stuff like that. The little things like that is what makes basketball interesting, and that's the same thing that makes hip hop interesting. Like if you hear a New York rapper, you would want to hear their influences from like Biggie, Jay-Z, Nas. Like what category do they fall under more? Now today they got more drill rap, but that's still tied to the legacy that 50 Cent left, and Wu Tang. So it's just a lot of different influences that you're trying to hear what's the core of that. And when you're watching international players who you don't know about, you're kind of missing that valuable piece of information to help you decide if you like this person or not, or give you some basis to root for them or root against them. And I think that's a big driving force in both when it comes to black entertainment. Like we want to know the closest thing to your origin, and I think that's where the music is important. Like we want to hear what struggles you had to overcome in order to and that's how people determine, in a sense, your blackness almost.
It's funny that your last statement is very interesting because I was listening to Dr. George Frazier, who wrote the book Success Runs in Our Race, and he made a statement, I'm paraphrasing, that black folks are the only group that glorifies the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And as I thought about what you had to say about John Moran and his hunger, that hunger should be more akin to what we see more in. In other words, we shouldn't depend upon a person coming from a drug addicted parent or some circumstance like that in order for them to want to be successful in life.
Right.
Because what if your parents were quote unquote normal and weren't grappling with the bottom? Then does that mean that that person is not going to experience mega success? Not necessarily. So I think that we have to I think that we have to begin to change the narrative around that.
I agree.
Struggle is important, but like you were saying earlier, what kind of struggle are we talking about? Struggling in the weight room. I saw a piece on Snoop Dogg recently. I think it was at halftime of a football game or something, and this commentator was talking about meeting Snoop Dogg as a young man, a teenager, and
Mm-hmm.
how Snoop Dogg kept coming to the football games. He kept coming to the Raider games in order to get an opportunity to be a water boy or something. And I think the reporter introduced Snoop to Al Davis, and Al Davis, you know, told him to, take off all of that paraphernalia for, I can't remember which team he was rooting for at which football team. It wasn't the Raiders. It was another team. I can't remember what team it was that Snoop had the paraphernalia on for.
Mhm.
But anyway, now of course Snoop would also be in that category of people who came up from the bottom. But my point is that maybe part of what we have to do a better job of is whether our children be so-called middle class or upper class, helping them to identify their purpose so that coming from the bottom is not the only motivation for pushing pushing ahead.
Nah, I agree with that, and I think
Let's see. Hopefully, Dre will come back in shortly.
he was trying to pull it up. Just, but yeah, I was thinking
They could just they could just me here right now.
you can't hear me.
Yeah. So the whole idea of what is going on with the NBA that the gentleman was talking about on the video, it's an interesting idea, and I'm not sure if I agree with him about the irrelevancy of the NBA because there's a lot of revenue and advertising that goes into making the NBA what it is. And I think what will continue to make the NBA attractive has to do with that international audience. That international audience is important. The NBA is reaching into Africa, and you got Embiid and so many other players. I think the guy from the Pacers comes from Africa. I forgot his name right now.
Everybody been
So as the NBA becomes more of an international game, then I think it will play into it continuing to have relevancy in that respect. But I guess his point was that in the United States, the relevancy would go down. I don't know. I think just like in baseball, Shoni Otani, the the guy who many are considering possibly the greatest baseball player ever, the
Hmm.
way he pitches and hits, I think that he's done a good job of not only securing an international audience, but he's also created a lot of attention amongst baseball enthusiasts here in the United States. So that part of the argument that he was raising, while you were gone, I was just talking about this whole idea of the NBA becoming irrelevant in 15 years.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that point because of the presence of the international flavor.
Hmm.
And as the NBA continues to reach into Africa, we know they're deep into Europe and they've been in Asia for a minute. I think that I'm on the fence about that whole irrelevancy piece.
Yeah, I think his. I feel like his take was more for people in America being invested in it, not necessarily because I think the same with hip hop. I mean, with the NBA and hip hop, it's becoming more global now. So it's like they're expanding their audience, but at the same time, it's kind of losing its connection to its original roots. So, because I feel the same like when we see all these UK artists, when I see I always said their music sounds like they're from the '90s. Like if you hear any current like UK R&B, it sounds like the '90s. Their rap style sounds a lot like the '90s. So I think in once things kind of leave America, then I don't know how that even happened. So that was always an interesting phenomenon for me. They're pretty focused on bars. They're not really into the whole song creation yet. There's a couple of good songs from the UK, but yeah, I mean, you kind of get the it kind of expands your mind to see that there's other places that are going through similar because we were, I guess, right before what had happened was my browser had shut down, so that's why I could still see and hear you, but right before we had got disconnected, I was talking about, I think, when Kanye was coming up, and he kind of switched it from the struggle of being like a gangster rapper or something. Like that was a big turning point, and I do think we need to focus on, the struggles of, getting your art out, as opposed to the struggle that created the art, or instead of like highlighting that. But I think that's just goes into the interest factor. Like the reason why people are less interested is because it's people were attracted to the street aspect of hip hop. And when Iverson was looking looking like a thug, early on, people like that vibe. So, but I do agree that we need to kind of redefine how we fuel our success, and find more creative ways to express ourselves that doesn't always have to. I don't like that. I'm always saying I don't like just black people being associated with poverty or having to make it out of poverty. And especially for that to kind of be a litmus test for your blackness. I really don't like that. Um, so I don't know. I don't exactly know how to how to change that at this point in time. But I know that that's how people are looking at it. So we do need to we need to change it. And but I think people like John Morant, yeah. So he didn't come from the bottom. His father was there, helping him, but he still has some of that attitude that people, wanted to see. So it's like maybe he just wanted to be too much of a thug. But I like the added. I think he still needs that mentality in order to do the things that he's doing. Like I feel like had he not gotten into trouble for real, he'd be the face. He really would be the front runner for face of the NBA. And I think by them not giving it, it's hurting the NBA, because that's who people want to see. I mean, he's doing the dunks. He got the mentality to go right to the hole every time, score when you need to score, like that competitiveness. Maybe it's just competitiveness. I don't know.
Now, it's funny that one of your favorite, if not your favorite player, was Kevin Garnett, because enough, although when we think about hip hop and embodiment of hip hop, AI comes up. But Kevin Garnett would fit that role as well, because KG, he was, he definitely had that edge to him,
Mm.
that hip hop flair edge to him, and he might not get enough credit for bringing that type of edge.
Yeah, he was also, that was back when I think a lot of things get lost when kids go through college too, because I think a lot of that's another thing that weeds out that rawness, maybe, because Garnett was one of the last people to come directly from high school, so people really, zoned in on, is he good enough to be in the NBA right now. Kobe had the similar thing, so I feel like that was one of the steps that kind of took people's intrigue out of the NBA, when they stopped letting people come straight from high school, because it's like, okay, you want to see how this young teenager is about to do against these grown men who are like professionals, and how they match up. Um, and so a lot of them had to go to to college, and some of them don't make it out of college, or they start getting outplayed early on in college. So it never really pans out. But then you have let's see, Lamelo Ball. He went overseas. You know, they the ball. LeVar Ball did something, and he shook it up a little bit. He got two of his sons to the NBA, and the middle one had a chance, or he was at least in the G League for a while. So you know, LeVar did something that was pretty interesting, especially as a black father at that time. I was definitely rooting for the Balls at that point. I'm not I wasn't their hugest fan personally. But I've grown to appreciate Lamelo's style of play, even though I wasn't really it was so unorthodox at first. I really wasn't a huge fan of him, even though I was watching him in high school and seeing him break some crazy records. It always felt like, I don't want to say silly, but it was just like you're not used to somebody with the lacking of the the polished shooting form being accepted at those higher levels. And that was something that they would always tell you when you were young, like, oh, if your shots like, I think that got a lot of people, because there's always people who can shoot the lights out, but their form was so ugly people wouldn't take them seriously. So he was one of those first people, well, not one of the first people, because there's been some ugly shots in the NBA like Sean Marion and just a whole bunch of, who else got an ugly shot? The guy on the Timberwolves right now, he's got a crazy shot. I can't think of his name right now, but yeah, he was one of the first people who was like, oh yeah, you don't have to have the perfect set shooting, or you don't gotta have the Ray Allen form or a JJ Redick form, whatever, and you could still make it. So I think he gave, but I think that's also why he's so popular, because he gives these kids a lot of hope who didn't necessarily have they're just figuring out a way to put the ball in the basket. And I feel like that's Kyrie too. Like Kyrie's story, when he's talking about, or I've heard Iman Shumpert talk about how Kyrie had a broken basketboard, and so that's how he learned how to do all his crazy finishes. Like he only had a piece of backboard to bounce the ball off of to make it when he was
Wow.
practicing. So, but those are the stories that you can kind of get behind, and you want to see. Like that's the only, like I will only watch the Mavericks games simply, or at least their highlights, just to see what how Kyrie scored, because to me he approaches the game like art. He knows he can do so much with into a team, and he's picking them apart. Like, so you were watching him dissect the defense, set things up, just let the game flow to him. And that's why I appreciate watching him. I used to appreciate watching Rondo. Those are like my two favorite point guards of all time. And then yeah, and then now Ja Morant, I watch him. Anthony Edwards, though there's still a lot of good players, but you just kind of have to go. You gotta have to find them. I used to watch so much high school basketball because it was so competitive, and you would just see so many different styles. Yeah, or it was actually because of the hoop mixtapes. Remember, I don't know if you remember the
Mm-hmm.
Ball is Life hoop
Mm-hmm.
mixtapes. Man, I watch
Mm-hmm.
those for hours and just try and practice the moves that I would see people doing on there. So, and that kind of goes back into the vibe of hip hop, or the spirit of hip hop, I would say. With mixtapes, you just showing what you can do on a promotional track real quick, and have people buy into it until you finally drop an album. So those are some of the correlations I've seen between with the decline of hip hop. You're not getting those, because you would see people playing on street ball in their mixtapes before, like back all the way back to and one, when they had those types of mixtapes. And then eventually Skip to Malou got to the NBA. So those stories are kind of lost now in current day NBA. And yeah, it's a different game now. and it would.
As you were talking, of course, you brought in a very important element as far as the mixtapes, and I'm not sure they still doing that.
Like hip hop mixtapes or basketball.
I'm talking about the mixtapes connected to the NBA and the players, because I remember, as I think more, um, Shaquille also played a part in connecting hip hop to the NBA because, of course, Shaquille, he had that foray where he was, where he put the rap album out and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And if I remember, you may have seen this documentary where Shaquille and several of the other players, they had teams that competed at Rucker Park.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so, in that way, there was that marriage between the NBA and, and hip hop, which was primarily what we were seeing in I guess, the early 2000s, late 90s, with,
Yeah.
with
Early
that.
2000. Yeah. Early 2000s.
Yeah,
Mid, almost early 2010s. No, yeah, really more early, early 2000s. Because
yeah.
I'm
So,
thinking like Sebastian Telfair. Did you see Through the Fire? That
no.
documentary. Okay, that was like Sebastian Telfair. That's Sebastian Telfair. That was one of my favorite point guards. That was Stephon Marbury's younger cousin.
Okay, I
So
didn't know that.
yeah, he had a, documentary called Through the Fire when he was like the number one point guard from Coney Island at that point. So he played for Lincoln, and but I remember watching that, and man, that was like so motivational to just practice. You would see, he started, he'd be running, he'd show him working out in the morning, and then just him going to the. He was actually, I think he was maybe like a class behind LeBron, or maybe a couple of classes behind LeBron. Um, but they had played at Rutgers. It was Sebastian Telfair's team. I want to say against LeBron in the Rutgers game. Um, and I think Sebastian Telfair, or I think Jay Z was like hosting the team, so he was really cool and tight with Jay Z. And then I think that he might have been playing Fat Joe's team or something like that. So that was more. It was so much more cultural back in the day, and you knew you had to kind of be tapped into the music scene to know how big of a deal somebody was. So it's like, rappers might say your name in a song. Like, they saying John Morant's name in bars now, Anthony Edwards names in bars, but that marriage between hip hop and NBA, I think so. As they both decline, you just seeing it happen at the same time. But both of them are, I think, in serious trouble from my perspective.
It's interesting because you would think that something as successful, but again, it goes to what the guy was saying in terms of the NBA being personality driven.
Right.
Because you would think that with the success of Shaq and making the correlation with Rucker Park, and for the life of me, I was trying to look. I don't know why I always forget this Rucker Park legend's name that I had an opportunity to meet years ago and talk to on a number of occasions. You know, hip hop in its early days, because of the park and young cats playing basketball in the park, hip hop kind of always had that connection to the NBA from the outset. And perhaps, as the video was suggesting, as the game attracts more of a more of a middle class vibe, it makes you wonder if there's an intentionality around not marrying the two as the NBA and hip hop as much as we've seen in times past. Because
Yeah, for
for the
sure.
life of me, I wouldn't understand why they wouldn't continue the type of things that Shaq was doing and keep or replace. If Jay Z is not the it guy, then who is the it guy that you would connect to? Now I do know from my son playing that there are AAU teams that are still sponsored by people in hip hop, people in the streets, and so there's also kind of a tricky element. And I know I don't want to get into another show that we plan to do talking about the whole gambling thing, but gambling and that element has
Oh yeah, that
been
is one I wanted to talk. My
yeah,
bad.
gambling and that element has been unfortunately a big part of amateur sports for a minute now because I can say personally that my son has played in some games where it appeared that there was another element involved, because the calls and just how things played out didn't make sense from what we understand about basketball. So this is very interesting. Very interesting.
That's actually maybe this might be the last time, but we did always say we were gonna come back to talk about gambling. Honestly, when you say it like that, I think gambling is might have taken the spot of hip hop's influence on it. I think, and I'm just saying in terms of the advertisement, like we're seeing sports being advertised, or I see Prize Picks and Underdog Sport, like all these betting apps promoted like everywhere. I can't turn anywhere and not see something about gambling or and I think that's also detrimental. I don't know. I don't exactly know how it's affecting um the AAU games or high school games yet. But I definitely know that, with some of these athletes or some of these pro athletes who are trying to get a little bit more, it's affecting that. And the impact that it's having on the community is starting to increase with I think where I'm trying to think of when it became very very big and like almost normalized for gamble, like since it's all on everybody's phone now. I think we're maybe like a year and a half, 2 years into it, and I'm seeing just when people are talking about their reactions to parlays not going the way that they want them to, or people, some people really do believe that they consider the gambling funds into their income. Like they're like, oh, if I hit this parlay, like I normally make an extra $100 from gambling a month. That's somehow how some people are really calculating it, not necessarily taking into account the losses that they take, but that's something that I see becoming increasingly dangerous and detrimental to people's mental health. Like I, it's something that people don't even really too much talk about. Like I'm not a gambler myself, so I don't have those conversations with people about what they're running or any fantasy things. So I always try to stay away from that, but noticing more and more, people might make a comment like, or they might be a little bit more invested into a game than, the average person. So, with that emotions, I think that's kind of taking people's love for the actual game out of it because now it's so money driven. Like you're not even thinking about because your favorite team or your favorite player. Now your favorite player mess up your parlay and you can't talk to them or you can't even look at them the same anymore. So I feel like all of those elements
Wow.
are really starting to like culminate and are going to have negative effects in the future for it. And I don't think the NBA necessarily paying attention, or I mean it's not for the NBA to pay attention to, because I mean they're still just playing their games. But I think with a lot of people trying to bet on the Falcons, I saw a little bit of that game yesterday. I was like, I'm glad I'm not a Falcons fan. But I mean, it's hard to find teams, or I guess me growing up now and never really having a team that I felt like I was a diehard fan for. I'm like, why would I it's like it's always something different. Like there's no systems to fall in love with today. Like, I used to hear about people liking the triangle offense for the Lakers and stuff like that, or you just like the history of the Knicks at a certain point. But now I don't really like Boston fans are really diehard Boston fans. As someone who's never really experienced that level of like fandom for a team, it's a hard barrier of entry. Like, who are you gonna pick and root for every? It's like I would pick a different team every year. Or who do I think gonna win? So it's hard to invest. I wouldn't even say invest, but it's hard to become a fan now if you weren't already locked into a particular team. So
You know, what you just said, I've seen some of that. I've seen some of that where, because like yourself, I don't gamble on sports. So for me, if I'm watching a game, I'm watching it, for lack of a better word, as a sports enthusiast from a purist standpoint.
right,
But you're right. If you're watching, and you should try this if you haven't, try watching the game with somebody that's gambling on the game. It's a totally different vibe.
I hate it.
It's a totally different vibe.
hmm Yeah, it's something I don't. But it's because I always say gambling is something that could take your emotions from 0 to 60 in a second. Just one, people missing a parlay by .2, or being you about to hit and then something crazy happens. So it's just so much out of your control. Um, I just want people to be mindful and careful of that. I mean, I know they not gonna listen first couple of times you say, but like really think about it's like playing the lottery. Like they getting you in every week. Every week you playing again. Even if you won last week, they don't care that you won last week because you gonna put in twice as much the next week. And then don't tell me that you already in the hole, because now you have the mentality that I just have to hit one time and then I'm out of the hole. But then you hit and now you like, okay, well now I'm clear, so now I can start gambling again. And it's like all of these, and what they're really not telling you, and the big problem, and I think hip hop is connected to this too, because they got a lot of Drake is one of the big superstars who's promoting gambling. But what they're not telling you is that they're not gambling their own money. They are getting people who you think could afford to gamble that type of money, but they're being sponsored by the gambling companies to place these bets. So when you see Drake going and gambling $1 million or put $1 million bet on something, that's not his money. That's the same thing that happens at the strip clubs. Like there's a lot of things that these that's how these companies, that's that part of their promotional budget. They are giving well-known celebrities $1 million to throw at a strip club, so it makes you feel like, oh, you can do the same thing when no you can't. It make you think that you could bet $100 on something. Oh, it's like, oh well, if Drake's betting $1 million, I could bet 100. It's like, no, that's not even his million. He don't care if he he blows that. and I don't know that for sure, but 90, I'm 92% sure most of the time that actually I'm 98% sure that that's not their money most of the time.
That's right.
Maybe every once in a while they, but they'll get reimbursed in some other way from that company because it's all promotion. So
All that, I mean, I'm not sure how we would know if he even betted the amount that we're told anyway.
right, exactly.
That's the other side of it.
Well, sometimes he'll play like he'll go live and then play like some online slot games. So it's like people are watching. It's like, oh yeah, I'm about to put 100,000 on this slot, and then he might lose it and be like, ah man, but it's still regardless of that. That's Drake. He's got a billion. I would say, not even trying to pocket wise. Like me and my friend Chris, we've been talking about the deals. Actually, that's something I did want to talk to you about as well. The contract deal that or the contract negotiations that Drake has kind of been going through, um, in relation to UMG. I don't know. Did you hear that he was suing UMG?
No.
Oh yeah. So he's got a petition because he's saying that they used bots to make Not Like Us more popular than it would have been, and then he also has I guess it's a petition. I don't know if either of them are lawsuits necessarily, but I think it's another petition just saying that UMG is his parent company. We're trying to kind of, what's the word, defame, what's defame, or I can't think of the what's the name of that word, I can't think of it, but just trying to deface his name by allowing that song that called him
Yeah, defame would be a good word.
yeah,
Yeah,
I was
defamation.
trying to think of the actual legal term that they used, but yeah, defame. And so yeah, my thing when I heard about that though, I was like, Drake doesn't have as much leverage as he used to have, when it comes to the music industry, and so a lot of the conversations I've been having was 2016 Drake, had he gone independent, that's a whole different story now. And not even that he's declined that much, but it's just like now they do have AI, they do have more of a formula as to what works, um, in music. So I think now he doesn't have as much leverage as he assumed he would have at this point. Like I think his last record deal was he signed in 2022 for 400 million, and so far he's released three projects I think since then. I think he dropped Honestly Nevermind, Her Loss, and For All the Dogs. So I believe, and if he only had one more album out of that, that'd be 100 million per album, which is amazing. But it's like now if you wanna leave or renegotiate, your albums didn't necessarily get any bigger. So it's like, and I know you want more money, so you coming back to the company saying, well, I want more money, and it's really more because of your back catalog as opposed to your most recent stuff. So in their eyes, it's like, well, your music is losing value now, so why would we pay you more now than we did back then? So, and I think that kind of more goes to him being, he had a lot of things rolled out for him early on. I think it was almost a little bit of, I wouldn't say nepotism because he didn't have anybody in the industry, but he was kind of being treated like the golden child of the music industry, and that's kind of what his issue, or Ye was kind of saying earlier on, when he's like, yeah, Drake got a rich baby daddy Lucian, but now that they're not really working with him the way that he feels they should, he's kind of being a little spiteful and trying to sue. And they were saying some of the lawsuits are bringing about things that the company probably would have been doing in his favor earlier on. So it's not necessarily like he's suing for the betterment of artists altogether, but just more for selfish reasons.
Dre, I think I'm seeing something that I had not seen before. It's a very interesting correlation, and it has to do, in previous shows we talked about the plight of black men. And what's interesting about hip hop and the NBA is both of those industries at one time was a place that a black man could go to and feel like he could absolutely be on top.
Hmm.
And as I listened carefully as you were talking about what's going on with Drake and the whole premise of this conversation and the mutual decline of hip hop in the NBA. Well, in previous shows, you talked about the fact that record sales are plummeting,
Right.
and it's very interesting that in the same year we have three of the pinnacle characters of hip hop take hits. Now, in the case of Drake, it was he got hit, by somebody else in the industry.
Hmm.
I'm sure you heard about the allegations being levied against Jay Z.
Yep.
He's a pillar, and they've already, got Diddy up against the wall. So the question becomes, and of course, we know that with these three guys, in their own way, they represented because and I know we don't have time to really develop this, but what I do know is that Jay Z was attempting to create a new way for people to access his music. He
Hmm.
had his own app or something like that. You probably could
Title.
speak. Right, right. I
Yeah.
don't, I haven't really followed it that closely.
Hmm.
And of course, we know that Diddy had his own, station and drink champs, and so it makes me wonder if, with the rise of the black woman, primarily black women in
Hmm.
rap and dominating rap now, record sales, is if there's a changing of the guard. Because even in the NBA, many would argue that the best players in the NBA are no longer black. Some people would say the Joker, and they would have a good argument. And then right under him, um, what's the other guy from the Mavericks? What's his
Yeah.
name?
Luca,
Luca,
Giannis,
Luca,
SGA. Yeah, it's
Luca,
all. Hmm.
Luca. And so, man, we to me, I mean, inadvertently for me, you opened up a whole another can of worms because what it makes me ask the question, what is really going on?
Right. Exactly. I think, and but that's the thing. Like, when you see Jokic, nobody really. It's like he's a phenomenal player, but nobody really cares about how. Nobody really cares about him because it's like I think he doesn't necessarily even care about the game to the point where he has he treats it like a real job, which I think that's what the NBA wants. People want it's just like, oh, you just come do your job and kind of go home, no real extra stuff outside of it, but that's leading to the decline out of it because he's your superstar, but he has no personality out off of the court. So it's like there's nothing for people to really, love or hate about him. It's just like, oh, he's a tall guy who puts the ball into the basket is in the most simple. He got some good moves, but it's like you're not saying ooh or ah when he may make a nice pass once or twice, but it's nothing that you watch. I'm not watching any Jokic highlights for real. I can appreciate his game though, but same time I'm not that invested. But that was just to get back into the changing of the guard. Yeah, I think everything is trying to get as far away from black men as they can. So even I think that's why they're trying to get the WNBA up a little bit. They definitely put in a lot more marketing towards them, a lot more money behind them. Of course, you have the women in hip hop. Um, yeah, I just see with the decline of music in general, I don't really see. I see that the style has also been able to be replicated for by non-black people a lot more easily, and a lot of more of them are catching. But I think that all goes to make these vehicles more marketable to outside of just the black. But that's where it's almost the thievery of it. It's like you're taking the sauce from what we originally had, and now you're trying to market it to the world. And how are we're not getting any type of compensation from it. And
Wow, that's it right there. Right. If you can mainstream it, of course, the flair of an AI, it's hard to duplicate that.
right,
But if you can, if you can make the Joker the face of the NBA, then you can mainstream that into Europe and
hmm
everywhere because that's more you can more readily duplicate that.
easy. That's all that they're looking for. They're looking for something. I didn't even get the because I showed it to Chris. I had done another show when I was. It was a guy. I might have to send you that video actually, real quick. If you got some time, I would show you this video real quick.
Yeah, sure.
It was a guy. He was basically talking about the creation of Drake. So actually, this is we might have to get in and talk about it more in that, but I'm gonna show you real quick. Oh wait, hold on.
That just the title of that is interesting. The creation of
Oh
Drake.
my goodness, it's a doozy, and Kendrick Lamar is in it too,
Of course.
because they're saying okay, here it is, real quick. Let me switch this.
Oh, yo, this is man, we gotta wake up. This is serious.
Oh yeah, it's here. You can see that.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on, let me. It's pretty long, but yeah, I'm gonna just.
Supposed to be the king. And no.
I'm going to argue that yes, he was. And the reason is because if you trace the history of Interscope Records and Universal, you're going to see something really, really, really interesting. So around the late 80s, it becomes very obvious that the pace that hip hop is growing, this thing is going to be the commercial force in music. But who does hip hop, right? A bunch of people that we don't want to give money. So,
Mm.
Interscope almost
I'm gonna speed it up a little bit because it's really long. But let me just. He talks pretty slow, so it won't be too long.
exclusively starts for the sole purpose of creating Drake. Right now, Drake is an almost perfect version of what they were trying to create. Right, I'm not going to give too much details, but you'll probably trace it in the story. The first Drake that Interscope Records creates is Mark Wahlberg, Marky Mark. Right, this gets rejected by the gatekeepers of hip hop, which is the Black American community. It's kind of rejected. It's seen as like a funny thing. There's jokes about it, so on and so forth. Good vibrations, it's a jam, but it wasn't the target. Right, so they draw back a little bit, and they try again with Vanilla Ice. Right, Universal's also doing this too. Sometimes I forget which one you signed who, but the Interscope one is really suspicious. So they try again with Vanilla Ice. Right, Vanilla Ice gets very rejected because they just took what was working, which was MC Hammer, and made it white. It gets rejected by white people, gets rejected by black people, gets rejected by everybody, right? And so Vanilla Ice kind of, that project sinks. Then after a while, they start figuring out with each one, they figure out what mistake they made the previous time. Okay, what was the mistake we made? What was the mistake we made? That kind of thing. I think Marky Mark's issue was that the thing that they're trying to create was supposed to be very, very palatable for primarily middle class and middle aged white women, right? And Marky Mark is, he came with the muscles. He's a little intimidating, right? He was kind of he had an edge to him. They tried to give him an edge. And so they came with Vanilla Ice, which was edge free. He was dancing. He was smiling. He was a good looking guy. He was a good looking guy.
Wow,
And
yo.
so they drew back. Now remember, Interscope Records signs Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, and then they try again with their new effort, right? Which was Eminem, right? So he's gonna have the edge. We're not gonna say that he's just some smiling, possibly middle class white guy. We're gonna give him the white version of a hood story, but he's gonna have a very obvious cosign from somebody who makes the big decisions in hip hop and who we trust. Dr. Dre, right? So Eminem does the thing that Marky Mark and Mark Wahlberg were supposed to do, and he blows through the roof, right? To date, highest selling, I think other than Drake, highest selling artist in hip hop, probably all time, I'm not sure, right? But Eminem is on
Yep.
drugs. That's the issue. Eminem is on drugs. Eminem is not a consistent producer. Eminem cannot be put in commercials. Eminem is a little uncooperative because of his backpacker kind of ethos. So, okay, Eminem works to an extent, but it doesn't work in a you can't mass produce Eminem, right? So they dial back again. They say, okay, We can't go white. We can't go full white. We can't go all the way white. But we can't be too tied into this culture like Eminem was to the point where you're going to say no to certain things, right? Where you're going to reject certain things, you're going to kick back, you're like, okay, I don't want to look fake, I don't want to look like this, I don't want to look like that. We need somebody who is detached from the whole thing, right? Like Vanilla Ice, who has some sort of credibility like Eminem, and who has who we can put an edge on, right? We can put the concept of an edge on, and is a trained actor and can pull it off well, like Mark Wahlberg. And so they created
Wow.
which is Drake. Drake is
He's like somebody that ran for president.
That he's gonna have an issue with XYZ. If we need him to do or say this, so on and so forth, he's not gonna randomly go off on a Black Lives Matter tangent or whatever version of that was going on at the time. So Drake is produced. He can do Vanilla Ice numbers. He can appeal like Vanilla Ice. We can
Yo, you got to send me this so I can watch it. This is good.
These things that are very consistent, rapid clip, and we can manufacture mass.
Man, I can't believe it. I didn't even see this until we started talking about it. This is dangerous for Black men in both of those industries. This is and again, people don't like when I talk like this because they feel like I'm always talking conspiracy, but I mean, it is what it is. These things don't just happen.
I think it's just marketing. Like, they're looking for something that's marketable, and that just makes sense. If they want to get this, if they're trying to sell more product to the most people, it's like they have to have somebody who their audience is comfortable consuming. So that's where Drake comes in, and you see, it's almost like I don't know if you've read all of Destruction of the Black Civilization.
Sure.
So when they were talking
Leslie Williams.
Exactly. So when they were talking about in Egypt how they were lightening all of the colors of the paintings on the wall, like gradually, that's part of what goes into all of this, and I see it happening in real time now.
Well, even in photos and stuff, Dr. King is getting lighter and lighter. People better be careful.
We don't know what it's gonna be, but yeah, I was like, I'm gonna send you this video because it was I had to take it off of TikTok, and send it to people. Let me really copy it. Where's it at? Just so I'm sending it now so I don't forget. But yeah, that's what's happening out here. I think
I never, in all the time that we've been talking about, it wasn't until this show that it really hit me. Well, everything is about timing, because I think once you said what you said about Drake, which this is interesting because if Drake was their guy and now they're off in Drake, wow, man.
But Kendrick part of it too. Kendrick is rolled out in a similar. Oh, that's what he was. I'm gonna just finish it up.
We mean by manufacture mass produce hits with this person. He doesn't write. So
yeah, but Kendrick is a part of it for righteous reasons. He's a part of it, I would imagine, for the same reason why, we're even doing the show. He's trying. I would guess. I have to watch the video, but I would guess that he's trying to combat all of this. I would guess.
Well, I would still say that he still fits the mold in which they were looking for. Somebody who is, I think he's just a little bit more of the culture, but he's not necessarily because when you look at Good Kid, Mad City, it's from the perspective of an onlooker, not necessarily a participator into the gang violence. So it's like, that's his cultural connection to the streets. And, I'm not, and that's not even to say that, because I don't even think Drake is purposely doing it. I think that Drake just was the perfect person to carry. Exactly. So, and I think that's the same thing. So, because this came out way before the beef. Well, this was actually pretty old. So when he was talking about, well, no, this was around the time. But Kendrick when he was mentioning Kendrick, we didn't know that he was gonna be the one used to take down Drake, really. So that's where it's more becomes not necessarily conspiracy, but it seems like now if Kendrick is the next in line, then they're just moving Drake up out of here. That's how it looks like, because he got too powerful. But then that's when you get to see, it's like, Wow. So not even Drake was able to beat the machine, because at first you was thinking he might have enough resources, and the way he had his early career, I was like he might have the knowledge in order to, break out, but he fell into a lot of the traps that Ye was talking about. And I don't know if you've seen any of the Joe Budden clips. Joe Budden, he's not a fan of Drake, but he completely destroyed he he destroyed Drake in his breakdown of this whole where he's at now in terms of negotiations with for his next record deal. And it was just like, man, you really, and it was cuz he didn't go independent early enough. He took the money, and which was a substantial amount of money, don't get me wrong, but I think he was worth so much more than that, but it's just hard to turn down that money. And once he accepted that, then the record label knew that it gave them enough time to prepare for once he was ready to go independent. And I think since Drake never had that, had to get it out the mud mentality, or know how to really, I wouldn't say run a business, because I mean I'm sure he does, but just that creation of his own, because I think so much stuff was kind of
And
presented to it, yeah, and like he just fit into so many things that just worked automatically without him having to do too much grit or work. Like I don't think he had the confidence in himself to necessarily jump out on that limb and try to struggle for a little bit, but ultimately it trapped him, and now he could be done. That's my biggest thing. I'm like, Drake could be, depending on how these next negotiations go. I mean, he has those gambling deals. He got a huge. He actually, the thing is, but that's the thing in music. He's making more money from his Nike deal than he is from his record deal. Isn't that amazing? That's crazy.
wow,
His Nike deal was 450 million. His his record deal was 400 million. And I think that has to do with touring. So I'm just like, when you look at the work that you got to do for the music check as opposed to the Nike one, I'm like, man, there's no money in music. That's the big takeaway. Like nobody's getting paid in music. We was also in my other episode, we were talking about the record contract. This probably be the last thing. I don't know if you knew, but when an artist gets an advance, they pay that advance back, but they don't take the money off of the top. They pay it back. They might have 15% of the total income of a record. So that means that they have to make $1 million before they can even break even with the record.
yeah, yeah, I've heard of such things. Yeah,
And if they put more money, say they put another 200,000 towards you, that's still just getting paid out of that 15%. So now that's how people get stuck in their record deals for so long.
yep,
It's insane. So,
yep.
but I think that's a good place to end it when we see the direction of the music industry, see the direction of the NBA. We can hope that some things change, turn around in the future. But yeah, well, I don't exactly know what the future holds for it. So
Well, for me, and this show was very different from others because I think more than any other show, I believe that we raise questions that perhaps somebody else can take and expound on. For me, as I said earlier, I walk away from this conversation being very concerned about black men in two industries where we once were dominant. And of course, it's black men who aren't actually, well, for me, I'm not actually in either one of them. I think through We the Source, you connected to hip hop in a way that is more intimate than I am. But I think that there's a there's a new level of concern for me when I look at those industries and the standing of black men. Of course, my son is involved in the basketball part of it and aspires to be a professional player one day. So, this turned out to be not just an interesting conversation, but even more important than I thought it could possibly be.
I appreciate you having this conversation with me. As always, I appreciate your time. Thank you everybody who tuned in tonight and who will tune in the future. Please like, comment, and subscribe. We starting to get some comments here and there, so you know what I mean. It's like if you see something that you want to talk about, drop a comment. I'll respond. Or you have questions, want to hear us talk about something else, or something that this conversation made you think about. Please drop a comment so we can continue the discussion. Frank, thank you once again.
Yeah, prayerfully we'll be able to get one more of these in before the new year, and then we just kick it with the will of the Father. We kick it up another notch in 25.
For sure. Yep, 2024, man. We gotta count how many of these we've done, man. We did a lot this year. I think we started in March, so
yeah.
People are shocked at how many we've done so far, and so we were staying. We kept the consistency going, man, and I think they've gotten dramatically better. Like when I watch them back, the conversation's flowing. So it's really cool to see the progress that we've made together, man. And I appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man. Yeah. Good night to you. Good night to everybody, and Godspeed.
Godspeed. Thank you, everybody.